Chapter 25 begins with Edna feeling a little more depressed. The weather has changed. It's dark and cloudy, and she's struggling to do her work, which is her painting. She feels like she needs the sun to cheer her up. She has reached a stage where she seemed to no longer be feeling her way working when in the humor with sureness and ease. So she definitely, like when she's working and painting, she feels good, but when she's not, she's struggling now to sort of get traction or to sort of feel some flow as she's painting. Being devoid of ambition and striving not toward accomplishment, she drew satisfaction from the work in itself. So she's struggling with like, how satisfying is painting? It's satisfying. I would say definitely it's satisfying, but when the weather's bad, she struggles to do it, and then she starts to feel restless. So on those days, she goes out and she finds her friends to hang out with. So the people that she spent time with on Grand Isle, she starts to feel like her life is passing her by, leaving its promise broken and unfulfilled. Yet there were other days when she listened and was led on and deceived by fresh promises which her youth held out to her. So she's a young woman. She knows that she has a whole life ahead of her. And yet she's also an older woman in the way that she's living. You know, she has 2 children. She has a husband who treats her like property. They don't have a whole lot in common. They don't seem like they're close as a couple. So, you know, she's conflicted. So obviously all of this is inner conflict. She went again to the races. We're going to find out some more about her in the sense that she really knows what she's doing when it comes to horse racing. And Alcee Arobin and Mrs. Highcamp call for her one bright afternoon in Arobin's drag. So a drag is a horse-drawn carriage. So remember, the doctor was concerned that perhaps Edna was having a flirtation with Arobin. And now, sure enough, here he is in chapter 25. So Mrs. Highcamp is a new character. She is in her 40s. She has a daughter who often comes along to their social events because she's looking for young men. Alcee Arobin is one of those young men, so he would definitely have been appealing to Mrs. Highcamp's daughter, but it turns out that Arobin is much more interested in Edna. He admires Edna extravagantly after meeting her at the races with her father, so he remembers her from when she went with her dad. She had seemed to him unapproachable, which of course she was. She's not flirting with people. But this day, when they pick her up to go to the races, he doesn't feel that way about her. It was at his instigation that Mrs. Highcamp called to ask her to go with them to the jockey club to witness the turf event of the season. So it's kind of like kicking off the horse racing season of this particular type of race. And a jockey club would have been a place where, you know, you are a member. You can make bets on the horses. Other people who are interested in horse racing are members there too. So there's lots of club life in New Orleans. So she goes along, and it turns out actually that there's only a few men who actually know more about horse racing than Edna. Edna grew up around horse racing. She knows what she's talking about. She's able to choose the good horses. She laughs at Arobin's pretensions, and she deplored Mrs. Highcamp's ignorance. So Arobin pretends to know about horse racing. Mrs. Highcamp doesn't know anything, and she realizes she's sort of the superior here. She plays for very high stakes, and she wins money. So this is just an important thing to know, that she's really good at this. Mrs. Highcamp has a very dry personality. She is unmoved. She's not very interested in people. She kind of looks at people from a distance and looks kind of judgy, and she's kind of indifferent. So she's unapproachable, not very friendly. So it's interesting that she even agreed to pick up Edna and take her to the horse races, and that she's actually hanging around Alcee Arobin. That evening, Edna stays and has dinner with them. Arobin also remained, and he sends away his carriage. So like the carriages don't just wait. It's almost like you can call them to come back and get you. The dinner was quiet and uninteresting. So this is sort of funny. Arobin tries to make things lively and fun, but Mrs. Highcamp is pretty boring. She deplored the absence of her daughter from the races and tried to convey to her that she had missed by going to the Dante reading. So her daughter wasn't not invited. Her daughter was invited to go to the races, and Mrs. Highcamp obviously likes her daughter to come. But this is an example of how women are seeking intellectual pursuits. She goes to a reading. So, she's also someone who, like Edna, is trying to have more substance in her life intellectually and probably socially. The girl held a geranium leaf up to her nose and said nothing, but looked knowing and non-committal. Mr. Highcamp was a plain, bald-headed man who only talked under compulsion. He was unresponsive. So these people are incredibly boring. Mrs. Highcamp was full of delicate courtesy and consideration towards her husband. So they're not even they're kind of like Mr. and Mrs. Pontellier. They're not very close. She addressed most of her conversation to him at table. They sat in the library after dinner and read the evening papers together. So just the takeaway here is that it's pretty boring. Mrs. Highcamp even plays the piano, and she doesn't even do that very well. She doesn't play with any emotion, unlike Mademoiselle Reisz. So Arobin takes Edna home. The car ride was long, and it was late when they reached Esplanade Street. Arobin asked permission to enter for a second to light his cigarette. His match safe was empty. He filled his match safe, but did not light a cigarette until he left her after she had expressed her willingness to go to the races with him again. So he's trying to just kind of get in with her a little. Edna was not tired or sleepy. She was hungry. So it turned out they didn't feed her very well at this dinner party, and so she has some cheese and she has a bottle of beer. And she's restless again. She's kind of excited, I'm sure a little bit by Alcee Arobin. She wanted something to happen, anything. She did not know what. She just wants something to happen in her life. She counts the money she had won, and then she kind of restlessly goes to bed, and she's tossing and turning. In the middle of the night, she remembers that she had forgotten to write her husband his sort of regular weekly letter. She vows to do so the next day and tell him about her afternoon at the Jockey Club. And she lays awake sort of thinking about what the letter will be, and then in the next thing she knows, she's being woken up by the maid, and the day is beginning. So a few days later, Alcee calls again for Edna in his carriage, and Mrs. Highcamp is not with him. He said they would pick her up, but as that lady had not been apprised of his intention of picking her up, she was not at home. So this makes me think he's kind of creating a false pretense here, he's actually not going to be picking up Mrs. Highcamp, but he just says he is because he wants to be with Edna. The daughter was leaving for a folklore society, so the daughter is going to another sort of intellectual educational event. She did not deem it worthwhile to go in search of any of the fashionable acquaintances with whom she had withdrawn herself. So she no longer cares. This daughter no longer cares about high society and who are the good people to hang around with. She's more interested in learning. Good for her. So the afternoon, Edna says, is intensely interesting. The excitement came back upon her like a remittent fever. Her talk grew familiar and confidential. It was no labor to become intimate with Arobin. So this doesn't mean sexual intimacy. It just means to be open with him and talk with him. His manner invited easy confidence. So they have a date, basically, and then he goes back home and has dinner with Edna. He stays and sits beside the wood fire. They laugh and they talk. At some point, he's telling her stories about himself as a child and points out that he has a scar from a little sword fight when he was a kid. He had a duel outside of Paris when he was 19. And she touches his hand as she scanned the red scar on the inside of his wrist. A quick impulse that was somewhat spasmodic impelled her fingers to close in a sort of clutch upon his hand. He felt the pressure of her pointed nails in the flesh of his palm. So she grips his hand. And then that kind of freaks her out. She gets up quickly and she walks towards the fireplace mantle. And then she tries to sort of explain her behavior. She's like, oh, the sight of a scar just, agitates me. Like, it's just upsetting. And he apologized. He says that, oh, it never occurred to me that it might be repulsive. And he stands close to her, and the effrontery in his eyes repelled the old vanishing self in her, yet drew all her awakening sensuousness. So we even have the word awakening here. She's attracted to him, there's no question. He saw enough in her face to impel him to take her hand and hold it while he said his lingering goodnight. So what a flirt. He asks if she'll go to the races again, and she responds in a surprising way. She's like, absolutely not. I've had enough of the races. He's like, please, he's like, can I come up to your atelier? Would you like to sketch me? And she says, no. The day after, no. So I would say she is not ready for this. She has been spooked by him. Oh, don't refuse me, he says. I know something of such things. I might help you with a stray suggestion or two. He's like, I know about art. I could give you some instruction. No, good night. I feel like she's starting to panic. Why don't you go after you have said good night? I don't like you, she went on in a high, excited pitch, attempting to draw away her hand. She felt that her words lacked dignity and sincerity, and she knew that he felt it. So she's kind of like trying to be mean to get rid of him, but she can't even do that convincingly. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry you don't like me. I'm sorry I offended you. How have I offended you? Can't you forgive me? And she says, Mr. Arobin, I'm greatly upset by the excitement of the afternoon. I'm not myself. My manner must have misled you in some way. I wish you to go, please. So she's like, I shouldn't have touched your hand, clearly. And he says, no, it's me. It's my manner. My own emotions have done that. I couldn't help it. And then he tells her how he feels. When I'm near you, how could I help it? Don't think anything of it. Don't bother, please. You see, I go when you command me. If you wish me to stay away, I shall do so. If you let me come back, oh, you will let me come back. He so wants to be with her. So Edna did not care to think whether or not his comments were genuine. When she was alone, she looked mechanically at the back of her hand, which he had kissed so warmly. So when he leaves, he kisses her hand. Then she leaned her head down on the mantelpiece. She felt somewhat like a woman who, in a moment of passion, is betrayed into an act of infidelity and realizes the significance of the act without being wholly awakened from its glamour. The thought of passing vaguely through her mind, what would he think? She did not mean her husband. She was thinking of Robert. So this is important. She has been stirred by him. She is definitely tempted by Alcee Arobin. And what's worse, she doesn't even think about what her husband would think. She thinks about what Robert would think, because she's not over Robert yet. I think it's important to think to yourself, how is Alcee different from Robert? Robert has never done any of these flirtatious things. He has never come too close to her. She has never crossed that line like she did with Alcee, taking Robert's hand, but she's very much in love with him. And we know that Robert is in love with her too. They definitely spoke to each other in a way that indicated they had feelings. But this physical stuff, even though I realize in 2025, this doesn't seem like anything to be holding someone's hand or kissing someone's hand. But in this time period, this was very forward and very sexual. She tells herself that Alcee Arobin was nothing to her, yet his presence, his manners, the warmth of his glances, the touch of his lips upon her hand had acted like a narcotic upon her. So that's also important. This is different than how she feels for Robert. She slept a languorous sleep interwoven with vanishing dreams. In chapter 26, she gets a note from Alcee Arobin apologizing very sincerely, being sorry for being so forward, and she felt sure that the significance of the whole occurrence had lain in her own self-consciousness. So she's like, I just thought it was me. Like, honest, she's so confused. If she ignores the note, it would give it more importance. So her thinking is like she has to respond to this. If she replied to it in a serious spirit, it would still leave in his mind the impression that she had, in a susceptible moment, yielded to his influence. So she can't be serious in her reply either. She has to make it seem like what he did was totally nothing. So she answered in as light and bantering a spirit as she fancied it deserved, and said she would be glad to have him look in upon her at her work whenever he felt the inclination. So I'm not so sure I would have said that, because sure enough, there he is, like probably the next day, there to see her in her studio. So I wrote, whoops, I don't know if I would have said, oh, you can come by anytime. No, I would not have said that, but she does, probably because she's still interested in him. There was scarcely a day which followed that she did not see him or was not reminded of him. So he starts coming over all the time. He had all kinds of reasons when he was prolific in pretext, like he had reasons to be there. He was ready at all times to submit to her moods, which were as often kind as they were cold. She grew accustomed to him. They became intimate and friendly by imperceptible degrees and then by leaps. He sometimes talked in a way that astonished her at first and brought the crimson into her face, in a way that pleased her at last, appealing to the animalism that stirred impatiently within her. This is important. This is different. This animal sort of very, primal sexual urge is what she's talking about here, is different than what she had with Robert. It's a different part of her awakening. There was nothing which so quieted the turmoil of Edna's senses as a visit to Mademoiselle Reisz. Okay, so she needs to have someone help her through this. Somehow she's able to reach Edna's spirit and set it free. So she goes to Mademoiselle Reisz, and when Mademoiselle sees her, she said, here comes the sunlight. I wrote hardly, because Edna has nothing sunny about her right now. She's kind of a mess. And she says, it'll be warm and bright now. And this is a cold, cold day. Edna's been soaked by the rain. It's chilly. Where Mademoiselle Reisz is also drafty and cold. She's making hot chocolate. She offers Edna some brandy, which Edna says, yes, I'll take some brandy. And then she makes this announcement. She says, Mademoiselle, I'm going to move away from my house on Esplanade Street. What? Just going to move? And the musician, Mademoiselle Reisz, gives her hardly any sort of reply. Oh, really? Like, oh. Nothing astonishes her. And Edna's like, aren't you astonished? And she's like, passibly, like a little. Where are you going? To New York? To your father in Mississippi? And Edna says, no, just around the corner to a little 4-room house. I'm tired of looking after this big house. And she gives all these reasons why it's too much work, it's too big for them, et cetera, et cetera. And Mademoiselle Reisz calls her out. That is not your real reason. There is no use in telling me lies. I don't know your reason, but you have not told me the truth. This woman is so smart. Edna did not protest or endeavor to justify herself, because it's true. She does not tell the truth. The house, the money that provides it are not mine. Isn't that enough reason? And Mademoiselle says, they are your husband's, with a shrug and a malicious elevation of the eyebrows. Like, you have a husband. Let's not forget that. Oh, I see, there's no deceiving you. Then let me tell you. So this could be a quiz question. It is a caprice. I have a little money of my own from my mother's estate, which my father sends me by driblets. I won a large sum this winter on the races, and I am beginning to sell my sketches. Is that true? Laidpoor is more and more pleased with my work. He says it's growing in force and individuality. I cannot judge of that myself, but I feel that I have gained an ease and confidence. So she's like, this is kind of like for fun, because I have the money, is what she's basically saying. I I can live in the tiny little house for little or nothing with one servant, old Celestine, who works occasionally for me. She said she will come and stay with me and do my work. I know I shall like it, the freedom and the independence. What does your husband say? The obvious question. I have not told him yet. Mademoiselle is still not happy. Your reason is still not clear to me. It wasn't quite clear to Edna either, because literally she made this decision that morning. Instinct had prompted her to put away her husband's bounty in casting off her allegiance. She did not know how it would be when he returned. There would have to be an understanding, an explanation. Conditions would some way have to adjust themselves. But whatever came, she had resolved never again to belong to another than herself. She is not willing to live in that house with Mr. Pontellier, acting like, she is there to serve him. So she doesn't know the details of how this is going to work. And I think it's important to remember, like in this time period, women didn't do stuff like this. And so it's not like, oh, we're having a trial separation or anything like that. I mean, this is completely uncharted waters. And then Edna says she's going to give a big party before she leaves the old house, which I think is strange. Like, oh, everyone come over and have this great dinner party right before I leave my husband and go live around the corner in a small house. It's very strange. So she's going to have this party. She asked Mademoiselle to come. My hunch is that she won't. So then Mademoiselle does happen to have another letter from Robert, and she does give her the letter while she sits down to play the piano. And Edna's thrilled. Another so soon? Tell me, does he know that I see his letters? And Mademoiselle Reisz is like, no, I would never tell him that. He would be angry if he thought you were reading something that he wrote to me. And it's established again that he's never written to Edna. And then Mademoiselle Reisz just tells her, it's because he loves you, you poor fool. And he is trying to forget you, since you are not free to listen to him or to belong to him. So this is why he went to Mexico, because he realized he was falling for Edna, and that was inappropriate. He was going to be a gentleman, unlike Alcee Arobin. And so he took himself away to try to forget her. But of course, he's struggling, it sounds like, because he's writing to Mademoiselle Reisz and talking about Edna all the time. So why do you show me his letters, Edna asks. Well, you beg for them. That's a good reason, number one. So then she sits down to play the piano, and Edna reads the letter, and her response is just like she's exclaiming, like, oh, this is unkind and malicious. Why did you not tell me that he was coming back? Okay, so this could be a quiz question. Robert's letter says he's returning to New Orleans. And so Edna now knows this too, because she's been allowed to read the letter. But she's mad a little bit at Mademoiselle Reisz for not having just told her right away that Robert's coming back. He doesn't say when. She's very upset. And Mademoiselle Reisz says, yes, he says very soon. He'll be here soon. And then she's like, why? Why is he coming? Oh, if I thought. And of course, we can complete this sentence. Oh, if I thought he was coming for me. I mean, this is what she wants. And Mademoiselle Reisz kind of scolds her here. She says, if I were young and in love with a man, it seems to me he would have to be some grand esprit, a man with lofty aims and ability to reach them, one who stood high enough to attract the notice of his fellow men. It seems to me if I were young and in love, I should never deem a man of ordinary caliber worthy of my devotion. So she is saying Robert is a little bit ordinary. He is not like some amazing businessman. He certainly is trying, but he's struggling. I mean, he doesn't have a father. This other man is trying to help him. His mother's trying to make things work out on Grand Isle with a resort. Victor and Robert are struggling to become men. And Mademoiselle Reisz is criticizing Edna for loving him. And then Edna scolds her. Well, now it is you who are telling lies and seeking to deceive me. Why do you suppose a woman knows why she loves? Does she select? Does she say to herself, go? She says no. Like, you don't just choose. Like, it's a feeling, is what she's trying to explain here. You are purposely misunderstanding me. Are you in love with Robert? Yes. Why do you love him when you ought not to? Very good question. Now look what happens here. Edna, with a motion or two, dragged herself on her knees before Mademoiselle Reisz, who took the glowing face between her two hands. Why, she says, because his hair is brown and grows away from his temples. On the next page, she will go on to describe all his features, just his most basic features. So I made some notes here that I think are important. Mademoiselle Reisz and Edna have kind of a dysfunctional friendship. I mean, Mademoiselle Reisz is manipulative. She criticizes Edna. Edna looks at her kind of like a mother. She acts like a child in front of Mademoiselle Reisz. So it's not a traditional friendship. It seems manipulative. It seems a little self-serving, especially from Mademoiselle Reisz's point. Like, she's kind of like playing with Edna a little bit, which isn't very nice. She goes on to describe, Edna does, Robert, how he, how his nose looks, his chin. And then Mademoiselle laughs. She says, well, I guess because you love him. What will you do when he comes back? And Edna's like, nothing, except feel glad and happy to be alive. She just wants him back. So as she leaves Mademoiselle Reisz's, she stops at the candy store and gets a big box of chocolates to send to the children at the grandmother's house in Iberville. That evening when she gets home, she writes a charming letter to her husband, telling him of her intention to move for a while into the little house around the block and to give a farewell dinner before leaving. Okay, so this is so confusing. Her letter was brilliant and brimming with cheerfulness as she tells him that she's basically creating a separation between them while he's away, and he can do nothing about it. So this is just so strange and mean, clearly confusing. Chapter 27, we're back to Arobin again. He's with Edna. What's the matter with you? I never found you in such a happy mood. So, I mean, she's going from, highs to lows here, and she's very, very happy. Well, we know it's because Robert's coming back. Don't you know the weather prophet has told us we shall see the sun pretty soon? That's what she says is the reason. Well, that ought to be reason enough. You wouldn't give me another if I sat here all night imploring you. He sat close to her on a low tabouret, and as he spoke, his fingers lightly touched her hair that fell a little over her forehead. She liked the touch of his fingers through her hair and closed her eyes sensitively. One of these days, I'm going to pull myself together for a while and think and try and determine what character of a woman I am, for I don't know. So this is also important. Like she's really, bless her heart, she doesn't know who she is. But some way I can't convince myself that I am. I must think about it. Like, I need to know what is it I'm meant to do. And Alcee's like, don't. What's the use? Why should you bother thinking about it when I can tell you what manner of woman you are? His fingers stray occasionally down to her warm, smooth cheeks. So he's touching her whole face. Oh, yes, you will tell me that I am adorable, everything that is captivating. Spare yourself the effort. No, I shan't tell you anything of the sort, though I shouldn't be lying if I did. Do you know Mademoiselle Reisz? Edna asks him. And he says, yes, I know her by sight. She says queer things sometimes in a bantering way that you don't notice at the time, but then you find yourself thinking about afterwards. So this is, again, like they have weird conversations, Edna and Mademoiselle Reisz. And Alcee's asked, like, for what? Like, how? What does she say? And she's like, well, for instance, when I left her today, she put her arm around me and felt my shoulder blades to see if my wings were strong, she said. The bird that should soar above the level plane of tradition and prejudice must have strong wings. It is a sad spectacle to see the weaklings, bruised, exhausted, fluttering back to earth. This is a warning for Edna. If you're going to be bucking tradition, in doing things that might make people disapprove of you, you'd better be strong. She's kind of warning her there. Whither would you soar? I'm not thinking of any extraordinary flight. I only half comprehend her. Arobin says, I think she's demented. And Edna says, I think she's wonderfully sane. So Mademoiselle Reisz is a controversial figure. I've heard she's disagreeable and unpleasant. This is true. Oh, talk of me if you like, cried Edna, clasping her hands beneath her head. But let me think of something else while you do. So, they're flirting for sure. I'm jealous of your thoughts tonight. They're making you a little kinder than usual, but some way I feel as if they were wandering, as if they were not here with me, which is true. She's all over the place. She's planning on moving out of her house. She only looked at him and smiled. His eyes were very near. He leaned upon the lounge with an arm extended across her, while the other hand still rested upon her hair. They continued to look at each other. When he leaned forward and kissed her, she clasped his head, holding his lips to hers. It was the first kiss of her life, to which her nature had really responded. It was a flaming torch that kindled desire. So she has definitely crossed the line. Now, after Arobin left, Edna cried a little. Fair enough. It was only one phase of a multitudinous of the emotions that assailed her. She's shocked by what happened. There was her husband's reproach looking at her from the external things around her, which he had provided her. So everywhere in the house is a representation of her husband and the security he has created. And she just kissed another man in her house. There was Robert's reproach, making itself felt by a quicker, fiercer, more overpowering love, which had awakened within her towards him. Above all, there was understanding. So this is interesting. She felt as if a mist had been lifted from her eyes, enabling her to look upon and comprehend the significance of life, that monster made up of beauty and brutality. But among the conflicting sensations, there was neither shame nor remorse. There was a dull pang of regret, because it was not the kiss of love which had inflamed her, because it was not love which had held this cup of life to her lips. So the obvious question, what was it? If she doesn't love Alcee Arobin, why did she kiss him? What is this feeling that she has? I think this is a great thing that you'll probably talk about in class. It also might be something to write about.